Well, thank you very much. And rather than focusing on the ecosystem of science and research by and in itself, I would like to take a broader look at the relationship between the scientific or research community, the political sphere, and the societal sphere. It's supposed to be a triangular relationship, but maybe it's even a multi-angular relationship. If we look, for example, at the different interfaces between the science system and the political sphere and the societal sphere in general, I would like to at least propose three sorts of interfaces. One we heard today in the various presentations, which is a sort of individual interaction. As we heard from this morning when we talked about space research, it's the fascination of outer space, it's the fascination of deep oceans that stirs the interest of the individual and have him or her take a look at science by and in itself. The other individual interface is, of course, the promise of well-being, as we heard this afternoon. A better life, a more healthier life is a promise that is in the interest of almost everybody. So it's self-interest which is at the core, and the driver is scientific curiosity. You all argue for the curiosity-driven research. Then I would like to propose a second interface, which is more utilitarian, which is more purpose-driven. And it's driven by political need. The political system needs advice in order to shape economic policies. And so there are multiple advisory committees on economic policy, and these are researchers in the field of economy that provide advice to the political field. The same holds true for political questions. And so it's the promise of the stability or future prosperity of the system, it's the promise of stability and future development and adequate development of a political system. And the third level of interface I would like to propose is driven by societal needs. And we all preach the gospel of the grand challenges which we have to face and we have to cope with, be it climate change, be it future health needs, be it future energy supply. And so it's societal need that is the driver, and the object is society at large. If we talk about the transformative role of science, if we talk about changes, I would like to focus in the past few minutes on science advice to politics and science advice to policy at large. If we look at the first level, fascination, promise of better life, it's the expansion of knowledge into the mysterious world of the unknown, which is the gain of each individual, which can be turned into societal progress, for example, by an initiative I learned about last week, which is called Astronomers for Peace. As Sarah Seeger said at the end of her presentation, if we take the perspective of the outer space to look at our world again, we take a different view on this world. This is being used by a group of young people which organized itself in Cyprus and other parts of the world to educate young people to think about the globe from the perspective of outer space, to provide for a peaceful dialogue between different ethnic groups within a nation or other way, or different groups of interest within certain regions. If we look at the improvement of well-being, we heard from Professor Boon-Valeur proposals on how to derive conclusions from health research to how we should organize our future way of living together, as we learned today. The second level is, of course, transformative advice, as I said, to change systems. Transformations of societies as a whole seem to be more complicated. Professor Schellenhuber is a member of various advisory panels. The IPCC, I should mention, as a global advisory panel on how to deal with climate change. And in closing, I would like to make a number of very pragmatic proposals on the latter. What kind of advice is needed on the societal level to take advantage of the transformative power that science and scientific insight might have? A number of proposals and a number of recommendations. The first one is be as inclusive as possible in terms of academic disciplines in order to analyze the grand challenges, as we heard from Professor Bourguignon, but also in terms of inclusion of those to whom science wants to give advice. The IPCC does it in a way that the final recommendations are being proposed to policymakers, and then the final draft of conclusions is being written. So the political uptake is part of the process by and in itself. If we go even one step further, we could ask whether we should include society at large into the organization of the scientific enterprise in the very beginning. What kind of questions does society want to be solved? Can it be a completely democratic process? There is a former German minister of the environment who said, of course we need curiosity-driven research, which is legitimized only by individual curiosity within any given academic field. But at the same time, would it be too much to ask from the various scientific disciplines whether they might also be willing to focus on some of the questions which are relevant for the people in general? So how to find a proper balance between societal need and individual curiosity seems to be a challenge, and an inclusive approach seems to be one way, an early dialogue, and not a later just education of the public what is right and what is wrong. Rather, inclusion of the perspective in the very beginning would be my first advice. The second is be aware that grand challenges are not only challenges to the physical world. It's not only about climate, it's not only about energy, it's also about societies. Any advice you give changes society, and we currently face, and that I suppose to be a major global challenge, we see and face a challenge to liberal, open, democratic societies. Will those societies survive? It's a deep and profound question we have to be aware of. Then I would say my third advice is respect the interface between the spheres. There is the scientific sphere and there is the political sphere. And the political sphere is about debate, about options and finding the right ways how to act on a societal level. And it's legitimized by elections and other sort of political legitimation. What is the role of science? Provide options for actions, provide insight and derive options. And then it's up to politics. It's up to the people to decide and debate about what road to go and which way to follow. And this includes my next advice: do not moralize options. If you moralize options as being right or wrong in the very beginning, as being just or unjust, then policy can only follow one way, the way you want it to follow. Whether it's the right one or not needs to be debated and cannot be moralized in the very beginning. So to say this is the just and one and only solution is always very, very difficult. And my last advice is be persistent. The political sphere and the scientific sphere operate on completely different timescales. They operate under completely different constraints, and science needs to be persistent. If you have insight, just like in climate policy, knowledge has been built up over 4 decades, almost 5 decades. To deal with it needs persistency, and for this we need, amongst others, we need academies of science. Thank you very much.